Alrighty, what is up, everybody? Hope you guys are all having somewhat of a great day. If you're a 49ers fan, somehow, some way, who knows? But yeah, that was a tough one yesterday. I'm not gonna lie. And I think anybody that watches the game that is a 49ers fan mostly would agree with that. Not much optimism to come out of that game. Amin, what is up, my guy? How are you doing? So let's just get right into it here. Obviously, at first we're joined by Ben here. Obviously, Ben and I, we do this every Monday. Ben, how's your Monday?
It's not the worst in the world, man. I love Halloween. Halloween's a fun holiday to me, so I'm excited for that this week. Not really looking forward to the football aspect of this week. It's not been so great, obviously, yesterday. We're gonna play the Bears this weekend, and I mean, it looks like Matt Nagy's not even going to be playing or going to be coaching. So if the 49ers can't win this game, anyways,
and today we are joined by a special guest today. This is actually our first guest that we've ever had on these Mondays with Ben and Vinny. We're joined by Marco Martinez here. Marco, how's it going, bro? Thanks for taking the time.
I appreciate you guys for having me on, man. It's an eventful Monday, especially on the timeline. Everyone's going crazy. Everyone's overreacting. Everyone's underreacting. It's a lot of things that's going on. It's very interesting today.
Yeah. Let's get right into it. What the heck happened yesterday? It was so Colts win 30-18. Niners, first drive, they looked like they had 2 weeks to prep. And it was clinical. And you saw that with Elijah Mitchell. He had actually a pretty decent game. He actually had a really good game. That was one of the optimistic things coming out of this game. And then after that, it was just stagnant from the offense. And it's almost like a repeating record. And I tweeted after the game, that game, for me at least, felt like Chip Kelly was coaching. That felt like a 2016, because I felt that, like, in the Niners games I went to in 2016, one of them they played the Patriots, and that's when they had Gabbert, and they drove down the Patriots' throat, and they scored on the first drive, and then from there it was just nothing could have been made from that offense. And I've kind of felt the same looking back on this game too. I think some of it does have to do with the limitations at the quarterback, but I think ultimately it does put some, I think this was the game where, like, even like big Shanistans kind of like looked at Kyle Shanahan and were like, okay, we need something something needs to change. Someone needs to step up, really take, a hold of this franchise and move it forward to see some potential. But yeah, final score 30-18. It was honestly, like, for me at least, it was just a tough watch. Ben, I'll start with you. Like, what do you think what happened yesterday that led to that loss?
I think you covered it pretty well. What happened yesterday was the 49ers' first drive, they looked excellent. They looked like the 49ers that we expect out of Kyle Shanahan. And this is the kind of offense that we, have come to, like I said, just really expect from Kyle, using that misdirection, using all your weapons the right way, even when you have limited weapons. And I thought the fact that Jalen Moore played this game and I barely noticed him was a great fact too. I think there's not, so many negatives, but unfortunately, you look beyond that first drive and it's just awful offense. I mean, really god-awful NFL offense. You look, some of the statistics he put up, I believe it was 4.4 yards per play, 2.8 yards per carry, about, I think, only like 8 total first downs the rest of the game after getting 5 in the first drive. Like this is a team that went out and threw the kitchen sink out in that first drive. And then after that, they just played the most vanilla version of the 49ers offense, which is what we've seen from Kyle all season before the bye. So other than preparing for those first scripted plays, I don't know what the hell Kyle Shanahan did over the bye week. And I'm really starting to question, not only a few of the personnel decisions among this team, but really I think you look at every single position group and there are big question marks at who's playing and why they're playing. And that's something to me that's a recent phenomenon with the 49ers. Yes, there were some small issues with personnel in the past. Some wide receivers they should have played over others, certain offensive linemen, whatever. But I think you can look across the whole roster right now, quarterback, running back, even I would argue, wide receiver, offensive line, defensive line, corner. Like, you can look across this roster and say they need to completely overhaul half the position groups. And I think that not only starts with the front office and the organization, but also the coaching staff, the assistant coaches, the position coaches. I mean, what the hell is Rich Scangarello and Wes Welker doing?
I'll tell you right now, Ben, Wes Welker will be fired either before the season ends or right after the season. He is gone, 100% gone. Rich Scangarello might be the same. But that's just two pieces that I've got from people that have said those two coaches are pretty much done. So we'll see. We'll see. I'm for sure very confident on the Wes Welker information that I got. The Scangarello is like they're having trouble with him, and it's noticeable. So,
well, and I think given that quote unquote Scangarello and Jimmy are kind of each other's guy, I'm sure that doesn't help the narrative for Scangarello moving forward when obviously it looks like Lance is the future for this team. So. Yeah, I mean, what the hell happened yesterday? I think this is the kind of game that the 49ers needed to have in terms of the fact that I think this team has been in denial since February of 2020. I think ever since this team lost the Super Bowl, they've been trying to recreate or recapture that magic that they had that season. It was magic, but you can't do that in the NFL. I mean, just looking inside your own division right now, a team like the Rams went to the Super Bowl the year before you. And instead of trying to remake the roster they had that year, they rebuilt it and retooled it on the fly and made it better. That's what the 49ers should have been doing since 2020 when they lost the Super Bowl. They should have been looking forward and trying to take what they had and add to it. Instead, what they did was look at what they had and say, oh, this is awesome. We got everything figured out. We lost the Super Bowl. Great. I don't understand that kind of attitude. And that's why I think this organization needs broad, holistic changes. Because that kind of attitude that you have, that's not just one person in the building to me. That is the organization as a whole. And when I'm talking about the organization, 3 names in particular, I think have to go by the end of the season. I think John Lynch, Adam Peters, and Parag Marath all have to go. And I know one of the people that people love to praise is Parag. I'm sorry, I'm done with that BS because Parag has not proven anything to me since 2019. I know he's done a lot of great things for this organization before then. There's some good things he's done. But if you look at the 49ers team structure and you look at who has responsibilities, the fact that someone like that, who's the vice president, who's tied to the cap, who's making all these decisions is so tied to personnel decisions, like I'm guessing, and I'm just throwing this out here, but at least from what we gathered, I'm sure he was involved in Kendrick Bourne, DeForest Buckner, and every single other 49er who is going to maybe leave the team or didn't or did. When we're talking about the dollars and cents of the team and the little minute differences when you would hear, with Trent Williams or any other player that we're negotiating with, when you would hear about, oh, they couldn't find the money for this player, they spent less at this or discounted on this, or maybe the reason that they pick all these injured players is because they know because that's what Parag wants to do by picking these injured players, right? You can go and say when you're negotiating with them at the end of their first round deal, hey, you were injured coming out of college. We believed in you, and you were injured even throughout your whole first round contract. We'll take you on a discounted deal. Like, look at what they did with Eric Armstead. So, yeah, in a roundabout way, this organization needs to they need to clean house entirely, and they need to take a serious look in the mirror, and specifically. I want to talk to Jed right now because I think Jed, you just need to be as uninvolved as possible. And I really think his mom should be making all the decisions moving forward in terms of coach, personnel, who stays and who goes. Because right now, I'm sorry, Jed has not proven that he can build a worthwhile organization. I'm not saying his mom can either, but at this rate, you just got to change what you got to change. And the 49ers have had this organizational structure for the last 20 years with Parag and Jed and all these people inside the organization. It's not working. In fact, it's an utter failure. It only compares to teams like the Detroit Lions and the Browns in the last 20 years. When you think of when you really look at it in the grand scheme of things, with how many winning seasons they had and how many losing seasons they had and how much success they've actually attained. Yes, they've had really great highs, but that doesn't make up for all the seasons in between. So
and those lows,
clean house.
Yeah, and those lows have been like low. And I think, to your point, Ben, I think, the word that you keep using is like this organization. I don't think they're looking at it. For me, I think there is a lack of organization. It just seems like you can see that with like three different things in particular. Two things. Like one, I think the quarterback situation starting in 2017 when Kyle Shanahan took over, it's like, so you go into this new regime with Brian Hoyer, right? And then from there, it's because he's like a placeholder because you're planning to get Kirk Cousins the next year. Then you get Jimmy, and then you keep Jimmy, right? Then he gets hurt, and then you go to the Super Bowl 2019. And then later, we found out like last week, you find out that the greatest quarterback of all time wants to play for your team. And then the Niners are just like, I think they kind of, maybe this is just speculation. It feels like maybe they panicked a little bit and didn't expect Tom Brady to want to play for the 49ers, and they were just at the Super Bowl. So I guess given the context of the situation at the time, I can understand at least optically why that would have been a tougher situation. But looking back on it now, clearly it does seem like Tom Brady would have been a good addition to this team.
You also got to realize they would have had to try, or they would have had to move Jimmy Garoppolo, and at that point is which teams take Jimmy Garoppolo, knowing that you're getting Tom Brady, because you can't bring Tom Brady in unless you have already Jimmy Garoppolo moved. So there's a lot of things that it sounds like they tried moving Jimmy Garoppolo. I don't think teams wanted him at that time, so you can't really bring Brady in. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and then even with this year, with the way they're handling the quarterback situation, it doesn't seem like there's, at least from what we can see, it doesn't feel like it's organized. Maybe they know something that we don't, and they're like, okay, maybe this is just a little overreaction one day, but then you look at Marco, and Ben, you talked about Adam Peters, and I talked about it last week. I talked about it in one Twitter space. Why was Mike McDaniels hired as the offensive coordinator if you're not going to use him? Like I just think
he was going to be hired by the
Dolphins,
the Miami
right?
Dolphins.
Yeah.
So in order for Kyle to have to keep him, he's a very trusted coach of Kyle Shanahan. In order for Kyle Shanahan to keep him, he had to promote him to offensive coordinator.
Yeah.
Or he loses a good coach.
Yeah, and that's fine, but like it doesn't seem like that coach is being used. It seems like it's just like he's just there and he just has the title, but he's not doing anything. And I feel like that's the same kind of thing with Adam Peters in a way. Like because I get it, he's a little more of a different piece than Mike McDaniel is, but you hired this guy. If it feels like they moved. Okay, let me get my thoughts here. They moved Mike McDaniel and Adam Peters to higher up positions so that other teams couldn't get them. But then you do that, but then you don't end up using them, or the moves aren't working out. So that's where I think the organization has to be someone in the, like I mentioned, and this is one of our topics later. Someone has to take the realm of this franchise and say, hey, this is not going right, and we are terrible right now, and something needs to change. And maybe that's Kyle Shanahan himself. And I think Marco, you tweeted it last night. I think it was good that he took accountability. Like he's like, there's because I think a reporter asked him, hey, do you is this criticism justified? And he's like, yeah, I deserve it. There's no excuses here. And I think that's a good step. But, now what are you going to do? And maybe it comes from him. Maybe we see John Lynch get a little pissed off and be like, what's going on here? Maybe we even see some of the players that step up. Like Debo is working his butt off, and he is easily the best player on the team right now, at least offensively. And maybe he steps up. Maybe you hear Fred Warner get into some people a little bit. Maybe George Kittle. Like, something needs to change. Otherwise, this isn't going to be what 49ers fans, and honestly feels like some of the NFL thought that this team could be. And that's where I think it, brings a lot of frustration to 49ers fans.
Absolutely true. So what happened yesterday was everything you guys hit on is true. What happened yesterday was the 49ers head coach who dialed up a great 15-play script. He knew he was not throwing the ball. So he figured it was going to be a low-scoring game because the other team wasn't going to want to throw the ball. So what happened was Frank Reich actually trusts his quarterback to throw downfield because he has a strong arm. People don't talk about Carson Wentz as a strong arm quarterback. He has a strong arm. Jimmy Garoppolo does not. So in these conditions, the quarterback play matters more than we actually talk about because it's easier to throw the ball in the rain. And the reason why I say this is because if I'm telling you guys, hey, it's going to be a rainy day, it's going to be a wet field, you guys are thinking, okay, they're gonna run the ball all game, right? So now what that does is everyone starts creeping up. And that's why the Michael Pittman deep ball happened. That's why all these pass interference are happening because everyone's expecting everything to be in front of them. They're not expecting deep. And that's at that point, it's okay, well, Kyle Shanahan called a great first drive. After that, everything was terrible, right? So then I go back and look, well, we have injuries everywhere. We have all this stuff, right? A quarterback makes up for injuries and everything around him. A great quarterback or a good quarterback can make up for the differences. Kyle Shanahan doesn't trust his quarterback, and that's what leads us to a bad game. But this is where I'm going to criticize Kyle Shanahan. If Kyle does not trust his quarterback, this is where you go out, and a lot of people are criticizing Kyle Shanahan. This is where you go out, not to the media, but during the game. Start calling these deep passes. Start doing all this so then fans and everyone else see, well, it's on Jimmy. Kyle's calling a great game. A lot of the plays that Jimmy Garoppolo didn't connect on, Kyle Shanahan called a lot of players wide open. There was a lot of balls that were thrown, and people blamed it on the conditions. I tweeted out, do not blame anything on the conditions because Carson Wentz is letting it rip.
Yeah, you can't.
Carson Wentz was letting it rip last night. Yeah, he had an interception and possibly should have been 3, but he was letting it rip downfield. So at that point, I point to Jimmy, I point to Kyle, and say, you two need to figure it out whether you don't trust him or not. Play your damn rookie you just drafted. Play someone you trust. It's that simple.
With Jimmy too, right? I think everyone started pointing to that great PFF chart, right? That showed the big time throws versus the average up the target, right? And or turnover worthy plays. And I think, to me, you just kind of nailed that part of it, Marco, where it's that with Jimmy, if you're gonna be having so many turnover worthy plays, you at least have to be willing to take the deep shots, right? If you're going to have these type of plays consistently where you're missing linebackers and you just don't see players on the field in front of you, and you are going to have so many turnover-worthy plays, you got to be willing to take those big-time throws too and take those risks because right now, I mean, and I hate to blame Jimmy because he is what he is, but with how the 49ers are playing, if you're not going to be at least attempting to push the ball down the field, then defenses are going to key in on what you're doing right away, and they have been with Jimmy, and that's kind of the problem, right? Is that the game plan after a while to me becomes predictable. Even though we saw Kyle put together a really great game plan those first 15 plays, and with Trey, and obviously this is what we're going to be talking about more in this stream, but it's not going to be as predictable, and Kyle can survive some bad play calling and some bad stretches where his team isn't making the difference. But I think, just going back to last night, I was bringing up some of the plays after that first drive again, some of the statistics, right? 4 turnovers after that first drive, 1 for 11 on third downs. That's just not winning football. And until the 49ers offense can become more efficient and they can move the ball down the field like they did against Arizona, I don't know where this offense is going right now because with Jimmy, they can't move the ball and they can't score. With Trey, they can move the ball, but then they can't convert on those drives. So if you're going to stick with one, at least go with the guy who's getting you over midfield more than 80% of the time, right, with Lance, and the guy who's creating so much offense just on his own. So I think, and people have been saying this for the last few weeks. With the way this team is going, with the way the season has always should have been going, and how we should have predicted it, and how should have got ahead of this, Trey should have been the starter week 1, and it would have only been for the benefit of the 49ers moving forward if they had done that. And right now, all they're doing is delaying the inevitable, in my opinion. And really, you're wasting potential valuable experience for Trey Lance, because I look at a model like the Ravens, right? You look at Lamar Jackson, what happened his rookie season. To me, that's the way Trey gets inserted. And that's kind of how it's trending right now, right? Is you have an incumbent starter who, while yes, he's not the most flashy quarterback, the team believes in him so much that you can't just hand over the reins to a rookie right away, right? Mm-hmm. So that starter has to fall flat on his face and just outright fail. And I think that's what happened with this quarterback situation. That was always what Kyle was going to do, or at least what I hope he's going to do moving forward, is that now that we've seen, I don't want to say Jimmy failed last night, but that's what we're getting out of Jimmy. And to expect anything more, or to be very critical of him because of yesterday's performance, for me, I don't agree with that, because that's who Jimmy Garoppolo is. And if you didn't know that by now, like, what are you doing with Jimmy on your team? So I just think they need to get the kid in, get him that experience.
Yeah, and what I think the alarming part about like what you mentioned with like the expected turnover ratio stat that you were talking about, and I think Matt Mayoga talked about it over the I think it was last season. These are turnover rates that where you're not stretching the field. Like, you're cutting the field to 25 yards and you're still having this many turnovers. So I think it's a both two-way street. I think it's Jimmy, his limitations throwing the ball downfield when it's not someone like throwing into the coverage, because people will point to the Sunday night game against Green Bay where he threw it to Kittle. There was no one within 15, 20 yards of him. If he missed that, I would have been a worse throw than any of his other picks, because he was that open. And then, I think some of it is, the lack of trust between Kyle Shanahan and Jimmy Garoppolo. And that kind of goes into like the thing where it's like, that's the guy that you went with. And you could have said no to Jimmy when this trade could happen. You could have waited for Kirk Cousins, but no, you went with Jimmy ultimately. And so that's where I think that kind of trust could kind of be deflated a little bit. And so, yeah, I'm with y'all. I think Trey should start and play the rest of the year. What do you got to lose? And not to mention the things that you traded for him on like off the, or what you get with him on the field, but you invested your franchise into this guy. And yes, this is a lot of pressure for this kid now to kind of, turn it around in a way and give at least some like potential into what this team could become. But it's just a lot of things need to be worked on right now. And I think, I think it could be changed, but something has to change one way or another. So let's get into our next topic here. We kind of talked about actually, let's talk about this just for a little bit. Who do you think needs to step up from this point going forward, whether it's a player, whether it's someone in the front office, the coach, who's a guy that you look at? Obviously, Shanahan is the main one that he's got to turn this thing around, but who is one guy that you look at and you are like, hey, you need to do better and we need to see something going forward?
Well, I think someone who really needs to do better moving forward for the 49ers. I mean, there's a lot of people, but specifically one person I want to call out is Mike McGlinchey and Alex Mack. So it's two people technically, but I think with Daniel Brunskill, right, this is kind of what we expected out of him. He's not a high level or even really a starting level offensive lineman in the NFL. So I'm not going to be too harshly critical of him for something we already know, which is he's below average. But then you look at the rest of that line, and I feel like they've been failing this team. I think with Alex Mack, specifically what he was brought in for, he's not doing it. The communication has been awful. The execution has been awful on this team. And I think part of that goes back to the fact that, Marco, you and I were talking about this earlier, how they've tried to go in two different directions as a franchise. And I think because you try and do that the entire offseason, you're splitting, reps between the Trey offense, the Jimmy offense, the future, the present. You can't expect to have winning football in great execution when you do that all off season. So I'm mad at those individuals, but I also don't know if it's their fault. I think this team didn't do a well enough job preparing in the offseason for one specific offense. And instead, it seems like, at least, I'm sure, Marco, you might have some better information on this. It seems like they tried to design two different offenses, two different playbooks almost. And then when they got into the season and neither worked, they were surprised. I just don't get that.
So I'm not too sure on the two offenses, the two playbooks. They didn't really run anything. So I went to camp 2 days. They just ran. They had Trey Lance running what they have Jimmy running. It wasn't really anything new. I think Kyle's going to design all that going forward if he starts them. But I'm going to call out. Everyone's going to be shocked, but I'm going to call out Fred Warner. Where has Fred Warner been during this 4-game losing streak? Where is Fred Warner, the guy who takes away the ball, who plays with all this energy? Yeah, he makes some plays and he's showing his energy, which is called on the field, but he needs to bring that all 4 quarters, every single rep. Like, in order for the 49ers to go, they need Fred Warner to go. Another player, I just don't want to really say Debo, but I'm going to say Debo because, look, check this out. The reason is Debo's having a hell of a season, right? He is. But when you're just a leader by example, like he said it yesterday after the game, they asked him if he's going to be a leader, how he's going to lead the rest of the way. He goes, "I'm a leader by example. I don't really talk." Well, now this is the time where you take that next step into your growth as a player, and you say, "Hey, we're not our offense. You're the best player on offense right now. This is the time where you step up and say, this is not my expectations. This is not Kyle Shanahan's expectations. This is not the 49ers fan base expectations." So those two players, I want them to play better the rest of the year. Fred Warner and Deebo Samuel. And for me, it's not so Deebo Samuel playing better, but more so him being that leader in the next step of saying, hey, this is our opportunity to turn this around, especially against the Chicago Bears. This could be a get-right game. You go into 3-4 at home against Arizona with a little bit of momentum, a team you just lost to by 7. You played a very good game against. You could get right. Remember, this team has a lot of dogs. I could name about 7 players on this team who are very, very good. We got Deebo Samuel, Trent Williams, George Kittle, Nick Bosa, Fred Warner. That's already 5, and I'm probably missing a few that are still on the team.
Shout out Jimmy Ward. Jimmy Ward's playing good football still, man.
He needs to pick it up as well.
He does.
That's another player. Like, check this out. Our secondary has been the bad spot of our secondary, right?
Yeah.
Well, who's the veteran in that secondary? Everyone says we bring veterans back so they could help this team out, right? Well, Jimmy Ward, he hasn't done nothing. Go make a play. Go get a turnover. Go do something. And for me, Jimmy Ward, I didn't want to bring Tart back. I think Tart was done. It showed last night he was getting burnt. It showed that throughout the season he's been getting burnt. So that's what a player because I think Tart's gonna be done. He's injured. I think he's pretty much they're gonna let Hufanga start going. So I'm gonna call it 3 people then: Fred Warner, Jimmy Ward, and Deebo Samuel.
Well, and Marco, you talked about like leadership, right? I just wanted to say real quick, like, where does the leadership lie on this team? We saw Joe Staley talk about that, right? I think before the game, the DeForest Buckner situation. The one aspect to me that this regime has continually screwed up the entire time is they haven't been able to read their locker room. And I don't think they've put the right people in place to be leaders inside the locker room. And like, you look at their best players across the team, right? Guys like Trent Williams, Jimmy Garoppolo, George Kittle. I mean, I don't think those are bad guys by any means, but I don't think they're like alpha type leaders. I think if anyone, you would say it might be Kyle Juszczyk this year. And I think, like, to me, that's a problem. So I need the forward. There are a lot of things that bother me, but that was one of the things that's been it's been really grinding my gears lately. The fact that you look across this team and you look at the leadership. Like, I think Jimmy Ward's an excellent leader. I think Fred Warner is a good leader. But I also think DeForest Buckner was the heart and soul of this team, and those players were complementary to him. They shouldn't have been the outright leaders on that side of the ball, and now they are. And now the 49ers are struggling with that, and they lost Richard Sherman this offseason. So I think you look across this team, and they might be divided in two camps. There might be a veterans versus the young guys. Obviously, we're not inside the locker room this year, but this is one of the years where it feels like we need to be, because I feel like there's a lot more going on than meets the eye, at least in terms of what's going on between the players right now.
Yeah, and for me, to answer this question, I look at the guys making big dollars on the team, or that the guys that are going to make the big dollars on the team. And just to because I think, like I mentioned before, just someone needs to just go off on everyone and just yell and do whatever, and I don't feel like there's that main guy on that team. And I think that guy was Joe Staley. I think that was the last guy that you had on this team that would just
But the thing is with Joe Staley, I don't even think Joe Staley was like that though. It's not even about having to yell at people. It's about being a leader isn't necessarily about yelling at people. It's about knowing how to get them going, knowing how to motivate them. So Joe Staley I don't see Joe Staley as a yeller. I see him as a dude hey, we need to focus up. That's all you really have to do is, hey, you're all men. Yeah. At the point where you're all men, do your job. Just do your job.
Yeah, and I think my point there is just having someone there holding everyone accountable. I don't know if that's where I think it could be lacking, and that's where I think I look at, guys like Kittle, Trent Williams, Jimmy Ward, Kyle Juszczyk, even they have multiple guys. Fred Warner, like you mentioned, Marco, they have guys that they have some at least the top two highest paid position players in the league are on the 49ers. I think Kittle's the second highest paid tight end. Warner's now the second highest paid linebacker. Got the highest paid tackle. Got the highest paid fullback, right? Those are the kind of things. You have one of the highest paid quarterbacks in the league. Those are the guys that I look at least that need to really take accountability. And who knows, maybe they are, and that's not something that we're we can see or hear. This is all just speculation, but it's someone needs to hold everyone accountable and reach that middle ground, like you mentioned, Ben. If there is a divide between the veterans and the rookies and the younger guys, there needs to be that guy in the middle that gets everyone together. And I think that's where the eras of the 2011 to 2013 Niners and this 2019, 2021 is just so different, because they had multiple of those guys in 2012. You had Patrick Willis, you had even Navarro Bowman, you had Justin Smith. That's just the defense, right? And on the offense, you had Frank Gore, Vernon Davis, those kinds of guys, and all led by Jim Harbaugh, who didn't take crap from anyone. And that's where I think that's the difference between the two regimes, and it'll be definitely interesting to see
having a guy like Jim Harbaugh too, though, also was a reason why a lot of the players would get frustrated. You see their frustration because of a guy like Jim Harbaugh. Is he easy to play for? No, but he gets results. But at the same time, they're men. These are adults. You can't treat them like college kids. You come from college at Stanford and you're treating them like college kids. It doesn't work in the NFL. Yeah. And I think that's why Jim Harbaugh didn't work out versus his brother, where he treats his players like adults.
Yeah, and that'll be interesting to see how it plays out with this team going forward. So let's obviously we haven't been too optimistic from today, and I think it's hard to find some optimism, but there were some good points from yesterday's game, and there were some good performances. Obviously, most notably, Deebo Samuel had a great game. I'll start this one off. I think a positive from yesterday was Jalen Moore. Ben, I think you mentioned earlier in this, in the stream, it didn't feel like Trent Williams was missed yesterday. And I think Jalen Moore really stepped up, and on his first start Sunday night again in terrible, that felt like that is the worst weather I've seen in California in a decent amount of time. It was bad, and he stepped up. He felt like he was filling in that hole for Trent Williams really, really well. Yeah, he made a couple of mistakes, but he's a rookie. Well, What do you
Two
expect?
QB hurries total, like 2 pressures allowed. That's I don't know what more you can ask from a guy who's a 5th-round rookie.
Yeah,
I mean, the only negative I would say about Jalen Moore, I thought he played a very solid game, is one of the forced fumbles that happened on Jimmy Garoppolo was caused by Kwity. Well, Kwity Paye didn't create a forced fumble, but it forced Jimmy to step up and forcing Mike McGlinchey to get his ass whooped, which is it's a regular for Mike McGlinchey nowadays. And that led to that forced fumble. So I would say that was the only negative that I could remember. But I was watching Jalen Moore, and he was creating some rush lanes like crazy.
Yeah, and that's not to say that he should have replaced Trent Williams, and the Trent Williams signing was, a fluke. They shouldn't have signed him. They needed to sign Trent Williams, and that was a very smart move on the 49ers end. But, for how he was able to fill in, I thought he filled in very, very well. So that's my positive is there were others as well that I think you guys may touch on. But for me, at least, Jalen Moore, I think, stepped up really and played like a solid game yesterday.
Yeah, and I'll say one of the positives from yesterday for me was Joey Sly. Well, let's talk about that the kicking game, right? Kickers and punters are people too, and with Joey Sly's, no, I'm joking. I'm sorry.
No, they are. They are.
Okay, yeah. I mean, but listen, 49ers still have that $8 million dead cat hit with Robbie Gould sitting on the cap right now, so. No easy solutions to that. But one really positive thing I like from yesterday was Jalen Moore. Obviously, you mentioned him, but I think the 49ers really have something in Elijah Mitchell. And specifically, I think he works really well in the Shanahan scheme. And I think he's the type of back that, listen, is he the Raheem Mostert replacement? Obviously not. I don't think anyone is. But I think in terms of number one sort of back, or a guy at least that you could rely on with that many carries and that kind of workload, Elijah Mitchell certainly has shown that he can handle that as long as he's not going to get hurt. Now, obviously, he's dealing with those shoulder injuries. He's kind of in and out a little bit, but if they can rely on a backfield of Elijah Mitchell and Hasty, and they stay as healthy as possible there, I think this running back room is a little better than even we might have thought. But that was one big positive for me yesterday. I guess one of the other positives for me yesterday was, and I don't even know how different it was, but it felt like a slight adjustment from the bye week, is that I feel like we didn't see as much Mohamed Sanu and Travis Benjamin, although we still did see them. And I think they just got to kind of lean more into going away from those guys and playing their young receivers. Specifically, you saw Juwan Jennings on the field a lot. I love that. I think he's a guy you need to get involved more and at least see what you have in him, because with guys like Mohamed Sanu, Travis Benjamin, right, if they weren't on this 49ers roster, they would be either at the end of someone else's roster or they would be on a couch somewhere. So I think for the 49ers, it goes back to that same attitude they have with Jimmy versus Trey. You got to get these young guys the reps, because right now, playing veterans who are only going to be here for so much longer, probably only this year, to me, like, I don't know what you're accomplishing. So for me, yeah, I barely saw any Travis Benjamin. I was glad I saw that. And then, like I said, Mohamed Sanu, like, get him out of there. Play Juwan Jennings, play Brandon Ayuk as much as possible, Debo, Trent Sherfield, even. Like, those are the 4 guys who should see the field. And I felt like I saw more of those guys yesterday. So that, to me, was a big positive. And that was one of the things I actually thought, looking back at it, Kyle really learned from the bye week, is that he's hopefully not going to go to Travis Benjamin like he did those last 2 games before the bye.
So my positive is you said Elijah Mitchell, so I don't really want to say Elijah Mitchell. So I'm going to go to who I personally think played a hell of a game. I thought he was one of our better linebackers on the field, and that speaks a lot when you have Fred Warner on the field. I thought Fred Warner didn't have too great of a game, but I'm going to go Azeez Al-Shaair. I thought he had a hell of a game. I think he's been stepping up with the last couple of weeks with Dre Greenlaw being out. So what happened with Al-Shaair is he took a first couple weeks, so he was slow to come on, and that's because he missed a lot of time in camp. So this first week of camp, he was great. He looked good. And then he missed a big chunk of camp, and now he's coming into his own, and he's shooting gaps. And I'm like, whoa, don't tell anyone, but he might be better than Dre Greenlaw. I don't think Dre Greenlaw is that good. And it's interesting because you start having another linebacker who could play alongside Fred Warner. He can move well. I think that's a very good positive. I mean, you have young players who are starting to look good. I think that's a positive, especially when we question, can the 49ers develop their own talent? I mean, we see guys like Azeez Al-Shaair, who's been with the team for 3 years, step up and look like a good player. So stuff like that, I would like to see. People forget the 49ers in terms of developing their own players. Emmanuel Mosley, undrafted free agent that they developed. So I think they might be developing players better than the fan base actually thinks. It just takes a time to develop players, and we're in the phase of a franchise where you don't have time to develop anyone. They have to come in and be ready because you had a team that was so good, and you have a lot of holes now. So they need to just be plug and play, and that's not the case with who they've drafted. So it's a little. I'm gonna go as you saw right here. Too much talking there.
No, I think my second one was going to be the front seven. I think the front seven's been consistently showing up. Every week. It's just a matter of just your limitations that you have at corner. That's really biting you in the butt right now. And I think you saw that with the play calling of the Colts yesterday. Like most of their yards, honestly, were gained, and most of their touchdowns were gained off of just go routes from Michael Pittman drawing those PIs. And I think that's where, like, you look at the 49ers offense, it's like, okay, but why couldn't you do that? Maybe because you don't have a quarterback that can throw that far.
Well,
maybe that's why.
And for the 49ers defense, right, I think if you look at the stats in terms of like yards and all that stuff, the 49ers really don't rank that badly. But what they don't tell you is that for those yards, you're not taking into account defensive pass interference. So I think if you altogether collectively looked at the whole league, looked at yards allowed and combined like yards allowed off penalties, the 49ers would be bottom 8 in the league, bottom 10. So
I don't know if they'd be bottom 10. There's some pretty bad defenses out there, man.
Okay, yeah, there are.
There's some pretty bad defenses out there.
Well, I was just going to say, and I think it just goes like the Colts cornerback situation yesterday wasn't much better as the 49ers. Their corners, like they had a corner that went down too, and like their corners heading into that game weren't great. And go ahead.
My bad. I didn't want to cut you off.
You're good.
If we look at teams with bad defenses, the team that most likely might be playing in the NFC Championship, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they have probably, if not just as bad as a defense of secondary as the 49ers at this point. And they have a lot of...
Yeah, the only team that has more defensive pass interference yards against them is the Bucs.
But the reason why they're winning is because their offense has a quarterback that makes up for everything. The year the same thing with the Patriots. The year they went to the Super Bowl and they played the Giants in one of the years, 2011. The Pats had a terrible defense, but then no one will talk about how Bill Belichick was that defensive mind, but that year he had one of the worst defenses he's ever had. So sometimes coaches have years where they don't have what it takes because of certain things. Kyle just doesn't have what it takes because it could be his quarterback. It could be just Kyle. I don't think it's a fireable offense though, because if there's a lot of things going on, man. It's just I think fans need to stop saying fire Kyle Shanahan, because who do you bring in for him?
They're not firing him. They're not going to. There's no.
Kyle has those offsets in his contract. There's no way that the Yorks are going to eat that money again. Nor
should they. Yeah, nor should they fire him now. What's the solution now? There isn't any. So
I mean, if they want to get fancy, they could try to trade him.
Trade him. Yeah, that's the one way you could get around that issue. Is if you really don't believe in Kyle, call up Mark Davis, right, and say, hey, I know you need a head coach, right? I know you did the opposite version of this deal back in the day. Hey, you use a guy like Kyle Shanahan. He'd really help out Derek Carr. Oh, Darren Waller, he's just like George Kittle,
I'm just throwing that out there. I'm not saying like they should do it or anything, but if you're gonna fire him, you're better off just trying to trade him somewhere.
Oh yeah, I mean, everyone suggests that they could get at least one first-round pick for him.
Oh yeah.
So why wouldn't you trade him?
Yeah, that's not a crazy thing to think about.
But it helps with the offsets in his contracts too. I just wanted to say that, right? You don't have to deal with that headache.
Yeah. Speaking of trading, Trade deadline is happening in a week. That was a great transition there, Ben. Good stuff. Or no, it was Marco. Both of you. All of us are doing great. So trade deadline is in 9 days. So after this week's game against the Bears, Niners essentially would have, if they don't do anything in this week, they have 2 days to trade people, or try and get someone. It does feel like this team is going to be more sellers because they don't have as much capital, especially higher end capital. But I want to hear what you guys think. Do you think there is a situation where the 49ers could be looking for different pieces depending on what happens this week? And I know that's going to be a tough situation because you don't want to wait until that game to make moves, to really commit to either, putting the best pieces around, like building pieces for trade in the future or building pieces for trade now to try and make that playoff run. But do you think you guys see the 49ers more as buyers or sellers heading into this trading deadline, or do they not do anything, at all?
Go ahead, go first, Ben. You look like you wanted to get in on that.
Yeah. Well, the first thing I kind of thought of when this was posed to us was I think the one spot they're going to be interested in buying in at least is the cornerback position, or at least they should be. And the idea that if there are players available that you feel like you could potentially, because I don't want the 49ers to give up draft capital. That's not what they should do. But what I'm suggesting is they should trade players, and in those deals, try and get, if you're going to be trading a Jimmy Garoppolo contract or another player like that who has a bigger number, be willing to take a bad contract back maybe instead of just taking a 4th or a 5th round pick, because right now I don't know how valuable those picks are going to be for the 49ers. I feel like they need either established players or players that what direction they're heading in. So if they can trade for, one of these younger guys around the trade deadline who is going to be up for a contract fairly soon, and they can potentially sign them for the future and add them as a piece moving forward, I think that's a position they should buy for, certainly. But I also don't know how many of those scenarios are going to be available for the 49ers as options. And I think overall they're going to be sellers, because you look across this team, you mentioned that linebacker room. Either one of Dre Greenlaw or Al Shahir should be traded, I think, by the end of the trade deadline specifically. Then I'm a huge cap guy, and I hate to make it like all about the cap because there's so much more involved. But look at how many guys are going to be unrestricted free agents at the end of the season. If the 49ers don't sell some of those guys, they're making a grave mistake. Because I look at guys across the board, like your DJ Jones of the world, your Laken Tomlinson, players like that, where might they be a part of the 49ers future? Yes. I think even Laken Tomlinson, I would be the most hesitant with. But if you decide within the organization that those are players you're not going to be re-signing, trade them at the trade deadline. You have no other reason to keep these players at this point, especially those DJ Jones, Laken Tomlinson types, because right now you're playing a lot of those type of players like bottom of the bin money because you could this offseason, and now they're going to be waiting for the cap to explode. And right now, with how your team is positioned, you're not going to be able to bring back all those guys, right? So you have to anticipate for the future. You have to look at who's going to be leaving in free agency and who you want to retain, and you need to make decisions about that now so you can actually cash in on some of those players' value. Because, I mean, I really feel like, like a DJ Jones type guy could get you a 3rd, 4th-ish round pick, something like that. I feel like there's so many players on this roster where if they 49ers pull this off the right way, they could accumulate multiple 2nd, 3rd, 4th round picks, which they really desperately need right now.
So I'm in the boat where it depends who's available for me to buy. So,
yeah.
But it also depends on what I'm willing to get back for players I'm going to sell. Like Jimmy Ward, is he available? He's not a ball hawk. I don't see him in the long-term plans. He's a good contract that someone would be willing to give up for a contending team who needs a safety. A lot of teams need safeties. You could be a seller, but if I'm the 49ers, if I'm John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan, I'm figuring out a way to become buyers. Figuring out a way to get rid of Jimmy Garoppolo and become buyers. The reason is one, what culture do we have right now? Do we have a culture? Have we sat back and like, okay, well, our culture in 2019 started, so it's like, okay, well, where's that going, right? There's no culture. We have the Rams, the Cardinals, 2 teams in our division who are trading for players left and right. They don't care about the cap space. They don't care about that. So now check this out. You could buy, but be wise. You don't have to go buy some expensive players. Go buy some players who another edge, another defensive lineman, another corner, a receiver to make it look like to your team, like, hey, look, we're pushing our marbles into you guys. Let's make the playoffs. Let's get in that wild card and let's make it fun. So you can do something like that, especially with Trey Lance coming. You want to build a culture, a winning culture, and not be like, hey, well, yeah, let's just, you know what? Let's just sell everyone at the trade deadline. Let's just show our team that we folded on them. We don't believe in them. That's a very bad thing to do. So either you don't be buyers or you don't be sellers, because if you feel like, oh, I shouldn't have said that. You either be buyers or you be sellers, and you show your team that I'm folding on you. But I wouldn't be a seller because it puts that mentality in all your team's head where, hey, they don't believe in us. They don't care about us. This is a losing culture. This place is going downhill. And you're going to start having players in the locker room start talking, I don't want to be here no more. Just the way I see it.
No, and that's
Yeah,
a huge
and
worry.
yeah,
That's a huge worry.
I think it can't really be a mix of both. They gotta commit more to one than the other, and
like we've been talking about this the entire pod, right?
You could be a mix though, and you could be a mix in the sense of if you're getting rid of a Jimmy Ward because you see Hufanga as the future when he's been playing well. I mean, we could talk about how he had a broken coverage and stuff, but if you're investing in a guy like Hufanga and you want him to be the future of your free safety, and you do get rid of a Jimmy Ward and you tell the team this is the future. We're going in this way, but then if you get a Jimmy Ward, now okay, if you get a Jimmy Ward, your secondary becomes weaker. Now go trade for a good corner. So you could be buyers and sellers, but you have to make sure you word it to your team like, hey, just because we got rid of this player doesn't mean we're not all in. We went and got this player and this player to make our team even better than what it was.
Yeah, because I think the moves that they made last year, they traded Quan Alexander.
Then they made the move for the they made that trade for the Jets the end.
Oh yeah.
Remember
Jordan
right
Willis.
now.
Jordan Willis.
He comes back.
He comes back
this week.
This week. Yeah.
That's actually
that could be a big plus.
You know why that's a big plus? Our edge outside of Nick Bosa, they've been Ubukman. They signed Ubukman for crazy. I don't think he's going to be long enough. He might be a player you could trade. Hey, it didn't work out.
Send him back to the Rams.
and you saw, and you talk about like, getting those. I think you saw a little bit of aggressiveness even in that 2019 year. They saw it. They were good and they were at a good spot, but then they make a trade for an Emmanuel Sanders, not like a big name per se, but he was a guy that they were able to get, and then he was able to contribute and he did really well. So if you see this as a year where you can still make the playoffs, which I know it's easy to say, but they're only one game back on the playoff. They're only one game back on the playoff race. Like they're still like in for that last wild card spot, like numbers wise. So if you think that and if you want to commit to that, then go, like Marco said, go get those, like, not those big name guys that you need to get, like say like the Rams are doing now, or even like the Cardinals, because you don't have the assets to do that, but get, solid players around that you can really build around the good players that you already have on your team.
Like a Cameron Gassler.
They have because they have those guys already. Like you don't need to trade for those big name guys because you have some of those guys already in your team. So you just need to kind of fill in those holes a little bit around. Like you mentioned, a Dantzler would be a good guy to add because, quite frankly, you need a corner. Maybe try trading back Akello. Like I know he's not the biggest name, and like, but I'm just saying because I'm a big Akello fan. So, but I just think that maybe that's a guy that you could get, and because what could be worse than the corners that you have now?
Alrighty, guys, it's time for me to sign off. I gotta get back to class. So
no worries,
good talking to you
You're
guys,
all
man.
Good.
Appreciate you guys for having me on. Peace out. Talk to you later.
Great having you on, Marco.
Thank you, Marco. It was great having you on. Ben and I are going to finish it out here a little bit. So
one more player I kind of wanted to throw out there and talk about potentially selling is, let's talk about Mike McGlinchey. I'm not saying because I think from the buyers or sellers perspective, he doesn't necessarily fit either or of those, right? Well, maybe more of the seller, but the way I see Mike McGlinchey right now, I think 49ers want him to be their starting right tackle for the next 3 to 5 years. But I also think they might just be better to go cheaper at the position now and find a solution moving forward rather than sticking with what they have and then having to pay up for a guy who really you don't want to have to pay, but they're just going to have to. So if Jalen Moore looks, I don't know how optimistic they are about him, but try him out at right tackle in practice. At least see what you have. And I just think every player should be under consideration for trade potentially, besides pretty much Deebo Samuel. Other than that, I don't think there's a player that should be, Fred Warner, Nick Bosa too. But other than that, who's off limits? I don't really think anyone is.
Because there are teams that need and could use Mike McGlinchey.
Exactly. That's why you want to make that trade. And I think
that's where Marco brought the point about Jimmy Ward. Jimmy Ward's a good player for this team, but there are a lot of other teams that need Jimmy Ward. And maybe you drafted Hufanga with the intentions of replacing
Tart.
But maybe you need to, because Tarberry's Moore still on this team, I believe, right?
Yeah,
am I wrong on that?
I believe
right?
He is.
He
yes.
tore his. I don't want to. I'm gonna fact check myself, and I know he's a corner, so he's a corner. Well, no, he's a safety. What am I talking about? Okay, yeah, he's still on the team. So maybe you because he had some bright moments last year, and he was a guy that you wanted to. He was 1 year left on his contract, and maybe you don't want to re-sign him again because you feel like coming off a torn ACL, it's a little tough. But if you feel like you can do things with him and Hufanga, why not try to test the waters and see what you can get for a guy like Tart or a guy like Jimmy Ward, knowing that the likelihood of, especially Tart, likelihood that you're probably not going to re-sign him again, get that value out of him. So I think that's where a lot of these guys on the 1 year deal on this team, or it could be their last year on this team, the Niners could really look at and try and, get, whatever value they can get out of them and trade those guys.
Yeah, and I mentioned DJ Jones earlier, but another name, what about Contavious Street, right? I think you look kind of like all along there are these depth pieces that the 49ers have, where I'm not saying that they don't absolutely need these players. Like you were talking about with Jimmy Ward and Tart. I mean, they certainly, those guys are their best options. But if the 49ers have have backups or players they feel like that could be starters in the future that they could play at those same positions, they really need to consider seriously moving on from some of these players on this aging roster, especially some of these players that are on 1 year deals. Like you can't just let Laken Tomlinson, DJ Jones, just across the board, you can't let all these guys just go because I'm sorry, you got to retain some value for them. And I know we'll put tenders on some of those guys, but I'm sorry. If you're looking at your team and you're not going to re-sign Laken Tomlinson, Vinny, I don't know why you keep him around to the end of the season.
Yeah, or maybe you just you try and trade for these, or maybe you try to extend some of these guys now. If you want to keep them, make some moves that show you want to commit to some of these 1 year deal guys, because you can't just keep signing these guys on 1 year deals, especially what you mentioned before. Cap's going up. Players want to get paid.
Season's going to be crazy. Yeah.
So players are
they're not
going to get their money.
They can't retain half of the guys that they did this past offseason. Really, no. That's what it's going to be like next season. The 49ers, their team's going to be depleted next season. And that's why I think it's so important for them to seriously consider being sellers, is because where this franchise is headed. And I'm sorry, you can't be in denial anymore. And that's what we were getting to earlier, Vinny. They just got to be realistic. You just got to be willing to make the necessary moves, because right now, I think you look at Kyle, and obviously we're not asking for him to be fired or anything like that. I mean, there
shouldn't be. We're not saying that he shouldn't be fired.
No, but there are people who are saying that today, Vinny. And
yeah, no, I know.
I can't even talk them off the ledge that much, because even though I don't agree with what they're saying, I certainly understand the sentiment, because we know what we've seen with the eye test from Kyle, but the results, they're just not good enough anymore. And what I will say for Kyle's sake is that I think if he's able to develop Trey and get him moving in the right direction, it doesn't matter what the rest of the season looks like to me. And I know it doesn't matter to 49ers fans either, because if Trey Lance, if it has that same effect that the Chargers had last season where Herbert looked great and they would look like they were moving in the right direction, and they just had a vision with how their team was going. And maybe not even that they had a vision, but if they didn't have a vision, now they have a vision and they have a future they can build towards. That's what you want from the 49ers at the end of this season. And that's why I think they have to consider being sellers, is because I don't think it's that important for them to win anymore at this point. Like, I understand the importance of winning for sure. Don't get me wrong. I think they should try and win every single game. But if they are 8-9 at the end of the season and Trey Lance looks like a superstar and the best quarterback of the class, 49ers fans will be very happy. Not very happy, but there will be a
lot better than what they'll feel a lot better than what it could have been.
Exactly. And instead of going like 9-8, 10-7, and just barely missing the playoffs with Jimmy Garoppolo, because I just don't know what that accomplishes at this point.
Yeah. Last topic here we're going to mention super quickly. They can beat the Bears, right? Right? Okay, I have no clue. The Bears just got their butts kicked on the road in Tampa. They could be playing with the added sense of fire. Probably no Matt Nagy this week. Could be good.
Definitely,
could be bad.
Like it. And it's not just going to be Matt Nagy, Vinny. It's going to be a lot of the staff. Could be important players. Like, the Bears aren't just going to have one person missing like Cliff Kingsbury. Like, there's going to be many people missing in that staff. So there's no excuses for this game.
Oh, absolutely none. And there's really no excuses for this week. And I think if they lose this game, someone needs to be let go.
Hey, if that last game didn't force Jed's hand in terms of at least making a public statement, he's going to have to come out with a tweet right after that Bears game. Like, seriously, that's the one person we haven't heard from at all, right? It's kind of weird. I mean, I like it. Don't get me wrong. I don't think he should be super involved, but Jed, where you at, man?
Yeah, and where I think they could be exploited is the same reason of how the Colts exploited the Niners yesterday. Carson Wentz throwing deep balls to Michael Pittman. I think
those DPIs are going to
Justin Fields could cause this defense problems on Sunday. Not just with his arm, not just with his legs, but him throwing that deep ball to Allen Robinson, Darnell Mooney, those kinds of guys. I think that's where they could really be exploited. But again, this should be a game where the 49ers at least should win. Because I think
I don't even know if it's that anymore, Vinny.
It's hard to say now, but like they should beat the Bears.
I don't think it's that easy anymore. I think if you look at the 49ers, the rest of their schedule, right, there are a few teams you can look at, and I think you can say they should certainly beat the Falcons, and the Texans are two teams that you name right off the bat. They should win those games, right? I think you look at these games like the Bears, the Colts, the Vikings, the Bengals are way better than we thought they were, right? But, I mean, just there's so many teams where I look at it where I think going into the season, 49ers fans would have been like, oh, yeah, they should win that game or at least be pretty favored in that game. I feel like those games are 50-50 from here on out, really. I feel like they do. And I feel like with all the execution mistakes the 49ers have made, they've admitted themselves, all the penalties they've been making, the turnover margin was awful this past game. Like, it's just not winning football. So unless you can guarantee me they're going to win those specific matchups for, like I said, turnover margin, third downs, first downs, yards per attempt, net yards per attempt, all that sort of stuff, until they can absolutely dominate, I don't think it's a lock for any of these types of games, especially this Bears game, because while I don't fear the Bears necessarily, and I certainly hear where you're coming from, Vinny, 49ers have shown to be able to shoot themselves in the foot more times than not.
Mm-hmm. And the Bears, to the credit, they still have that really good defense, and
they do.
I think
that front
that front is insane. And you look at some of their corners; they have some pretty decent guys. Eddie Jackson's still there. I mean, Roquan Smith, they have a pretty good linebacking core there as well. So the Bears will definitely cause their problems for sure. And who knows who's starting a quarterback this week? I don't know who it's going to be. Hopefully Trent Williams will be back for this game. Because you want to at least get I know we just talked about how good Jalen Moore is, but Jalen Moore versus Khalil Mack is something that I would not want to look forward to.
And it's not going to look pretty on that right side either.
Yeah, dude, and they haven't even played the Rams yet. So it's like that's so I think it's Bears, Arizona the second time, then the Rams. I think we haven't played the Rams yet. So it's hard to really be optimistic looking forward, but
I will say the Jaguars are coming up on the schedule, and I'll be there for that game. So if there's one guaranteed win, you would hope it's that one.
Yeah. Who knows though, man? But yeah, not a lot of positives to talk about after yesterday's game. There were some, and we touched on some of those, but
and go back and watch that. And we had Marco on earlier if you didn't see.
Yeah.
We talked about some great stuff there, but for this Bears week, man, I don't know if this is a particularly great matchup for the 49ers, but I don't feel like it's an awful one either. Like I said, no. I quite honestly feel like this is a 50-50 game right now, and we'll kind of see how the injuries go throughout the week. And based on that, who's ever healthier, whoever Trent Williams, players like that who are really important.
Kittle may be back this week. Yeah.
No, he's not actually. He has to sit out for this game as well because with
does the bye week not count as one of those?
The bye week does not count as a designation for a game, and that's why the 49ers actually put him on IR when they did, is because they knew with the bye week in mind, they wanted to give him the most.
So that's 4 weeks of him. Yeah, that's 4 weeks of him sitting. So that's good. So yeah, we'll that's gonna do it for us today. Thank you for everybody that tuned in, that commented. Really appreciate it. Marco's stuff is in the link in the description. So is Ben's stuff. So is my stuff as well. We'll be on Ben's channel next week. Hopefully reacting to a win. Who knows?
Post Halloween too, Vinny. It's a Sunday night Halloween. What a day to have Halloween on.
Yeah, I know. So
hopefully
yeah,
not too spooky for the 49ers, I hope.
Hopefully not. Thank you for everybody that tuned in. Have a great rest of your day, week. We'll see you around. See us on Twitter. We'll probably be tweeting about some stuff. Peace.